Welcome back to another episode of the RAG podcast with me, Sean Anderson, the CEO and founder of Hoxo Media. This is the show where every week I'm lucky enough to sit with recruitment owners, founders, directors around the world who are leading some of the most incredible businesses in our sector and find out how they've got to where they are, where they're heading, and everything in between. This week, I'm excited to be joined by Hannah Donaldson. Hannah is the CEO of Meet Recruitment. Meet is a specialist life sciences recruitment firm with 135 staff across 4 locations: London, Berlin, New York, and San Francisco. Just saying those places gets me excited.
Cool places, huh? Yeah.
They are pretty cool places, yeah. 12 years old, or just under 12 years old as an organization, across multiple areas. Headcount growth is going through the roof. We've been talking over the last couple of weeks offline. Some really exciting stuff going on. So Hannah, thanks for giving us some time in such a crazy period you've got.
Pleasure. Good to talk.
No, welcome. Look, I've given you a little introduction. I always do that. But for the listeners' benefit, could you tell us a bit more about you and the business from like a helicopter view right now?
Mm-hmm. So if I maybe start with my background and what sort of got here. So fairly well-trodden path for our industry. So I academic background in psychology, knew I wanted to work with people but didn't want to be in a sort of clinical setting. So, business, moving to London, all of that stuff was kind of high on my agenda, back in my early 20s.
Sheffield University, right?
Yeah, Sheffield. I'm a northerner as well. Yeah. So grew up in
We had the same
Northwest.
Manchester to Sheffield. We did the same thing. I got there in 2004. So as you left, I got there.
Yeah.
Feels like a long time ago, doesn't it?
I know, doesn't it just? But yeah, a northerner, grew up in the north, knew I wanted to be down in London, went traveling after, did ski seasons and, all of that cool stuff. I knew I would just basically wanted to, start my, adult life as a businesswoman, I suppose. So when I was traveling, I met one of my now best friends. She's in the industry. She's a director of people as well. So met one of my now best friends and she sort of introduced me to the S3 group. So interviewed at the different brands, as everyone does. Like I said, it's the sort of well-trodden path. And joined Progressive. So that's where I started my recruitment career. So started in IT, like most of the brands there, was given the opportunity to set up the business in life sciences, or pharma as we called it at that point. Both my parents are medics. So having said I was never going to go into medicine or anything near it, I've kind of gone full circle and spent my career talking and engaging with scientists and doctors in scaling our business. So loved my time at S3, super grateful for the time that I had there, not only from a professional point of view, but on a personal level. Many of my closest friends, my husband, various different sort of really important and meaningful connections, both personally and professionally, came from that group. But I think I identified pretty early on that I wanted to be in an environment that was more entrepreneurial. And I actually hate the word entrepreneur, but
what do you mean by it? Like, what was lacking in that business? Was it the size and corporate nature of it?
Exactly. It's just that it was a big animal of an organization, super successful, phenomenal culture. If you look at our industry now, so many people, we've got high caliber people in that group, so many people have spun out of it. So
I interview them every week.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a phenomenal business, and I think definitely back when I started was an awesome place to sort of start the career as well. But I think I'm a big believer that there are sort of people in business that are really suited to that big corporate environment, and there are ones that thrive in, as I said, a more autonomous, entrepreneurial working environment. And I'm definitely the latter for sure. I love startup. I love seeing the impact that you can make in people's careers and your clients in a environment which is just that bit more tangible, basically. So decided that would have been sort of better for me. I actually interviewed with a load of businesses at that point, and that was all about sort of starting up, setting up pharma businesses at that point. It was the sort of, I think throughout the recruitment industry, there's been a time where everyone went into oil and gas, then everybody wanted to go into life sciences. Fintech has obviously been a bit of a high growth area, and pharma was the kind of talk of the town at that point, basically, alongside oil and gas. I think I probably made the right decision there in terms of cyclicality of end markets. So knew that pharma would be my home, basically. So I interviewed at loads of different businesses to set up pharmaceutical divisions. Knew that was the direction that I wanted to go in, and at that point, the opportunity to work with and meet with Paul Maguire and Alistair Shaw, which are the two people alongside me that founded Meet, came online, and it's something that at 26 years old, just out of a global financial crisis, you look back on it, I think it's probably, my parents were probably just like, what is she doing? This is seriously risky. But I really believed from the beginning it would work. I felt, really confident that we had a great brand proposition and a good end market. And actually, I had that kind of carefree 26-year-old mentality, which was, I'll do it for a year, and if it doesn't work out, then I've got a career ahead of me. And I'm really grateful for that, because I think, I am a worrier at heart, I suppose, a slightly anxious soul, which is maybe a bit juxtaposed to the career that I've taken and the job that I do. But I look back on it and I just felt really liberated by the opportunity to do it, and it was the best decision I've ever made, for sure.
I love that. Well, I mean, I think what you've said there is quite interesting as well about being a slightly anxious soul, because I think often, though, the strength to lean into that and to take risks is what I think we've all got levels of anxiousness, and some are open about it than others, but some people step back from that, and others, like yourself, lean into it.
Oh, totally. And I think that notion of leaning in is really important. I've done a lot of work on this, but an anxious soul, can actually be a really enabling trait when it comes to running businesses and being a really great business leader. It can be your friend, genuinely can be your friend. And I think actually leaning into it and understanding it, and understanding, the strengths and weaknesses of how you feel. I talk about it, to my business all of the time, is that it can make you really good at what you do. And I definitely think there's examples in my career where that has been the case, for sure.
No, I feel like I'm quite similar. I think I've talked about this before. I'm probably driven more by fear than anything else. It's all gonna fall apart, and that's always kept me so switched on at every opportunity. What were you like?
I think it helps you think laterally as well. You're always thinking.
What were you like as a recruiter, like as an individual biller in S3, and then moving into Meet? Did you love the job of? Because obviously now you're leading such a big organization. And I imagine you're not doing deals anymore.
No, I not quite. I'm still involved in like client stuff, but actually a whole recruitment cycle, I don't quite have hours in the day to fit that in these days.
Did you enjoy the job, like the actual nuts and bolts of the job?
Totally. I think what I talk to the people that join our business about a lot is that I think that you can think about being a recruiter, and you can engage with being a recruiter in lots of different ways. I think if you're the type of person that's just going through the motions, hitting your KPIs and therefore getting the outputs out, I personally think that you're not necessarily going to get to that level of high performance than if you're actually somebody who genuinely, and again, maybe this is my background in psychology, genuinely thinks about why people are behaving in the way that they are. Why is your client demanding what they're demanding? What's behind it? What's driving their behaviors, their needs, their wants? Same for the candidates. People, it's well known in this industry where people say, the tough thing about it is your product are people. But I love that. I love that not every single recruitment process that you work on is different, because it's a different person with a different background and a different aspirations and different lives. So I think I always really attacked recruitment and attacked doing deals with a really like psychologically analytical view on it. And absolutely, you've got to hit your numbers. Absolutely, you've got to have that grit and fire in your belly to just make sure that you play the numbers game and do what you need to do in order to be able to get the outputs that fundamentally give you the opportunity to be successful. But actually, what I love and loved about being a recruiter is that sort of depth of analytical, psychological, however you want to put it, insight into people that, I think really elevated me as a recruiter, and, means that, I've often been described, and something, good thing, bad thing, I don't know, as a force of nature. But I think actually as a recruiter, it's really important. You've got to be authentic. People have got to come with you. And actually, if you actually genuinely think about your recruitment cycles and think about why people behave in certain ways, personally, I think it's a much more satisfying job as well.
I totally agree. I used to imagine two people in a room before they were in a room. And I'd see the dynamic playing out. And I think I do that in life anyway. Like I was always the guy that would connect people outside of work, university. I'd be like, oh, you should definitely play for them, or you should definitely meet those people. I've set up relationships in the past because I'm like, you'd get on. Like that's a kind of, I think it's fun. It's natural. It's instinctive. And then when you learn all the processes, the classic processes that underpin it, I think there is certain people will get to a next level. I talk about this in my academy all the time. You don't get to the level that you want to be by just following processes and being the motions. You've got to be more than that. You've got to get to know people on a different level. And I think that the best people tend to do that. So let's go back to the start of Meet then. So paint the picture for day one. What was it like in 2009? Where did you start the business from? Give us the full overview.
I love talking about this, the good old days. So we started the business October 2009. So that was October the 1st was day one. Our first office was on Charlotte Street in London. We picked Charlotte Street because we felt like it was the right working environment for us to be able to build and engage ourselves and each other in the brand that we were looking to create, basically. So, so many awesome memories of not only, the three of us that started the business, but then when we started to hire. And actually, I'm super lucky that a lot of my management team, have got long tenure with us. Two of them are celebrating their 10-year anniversaries. Wow. This year, 2 or 3 are coming up to that decade mark. So, loads of really long-standing, memories of the time that we spent in the office in Charlotte Street, but also enjoying town and Rocker and the cocktail club and all of the good stuff that we did at that point. So that's how we started. Again, when you start a business, I think people are so naive to actually how basic the activities are at the beginning. It's as simple as, what are you going to work on? I started a business in the day where Blackberries were like super cool, and we were really forward thinking because everybody worked off mobile phones and Blackberries, and BBM was how we communicated. Like so I think that's buying laptops, sorting out the office, going to IKEA to get a table. We never wanted to start in our bedrooms and then see how it goes. We wanted from day one to have a brand, to have a business, to have a logo, to have a mentality towards what we were looking to achieve. And that's how we, set up the business from day one. But, of course, you don't have a client. There's not one candidate on your database. It is a start from scratch situation, which sounds obvious, but I think feels different when you've lived it. Definitely.
Obviously I started a marketing agency instead of a recruitment company last minute, but similar concept. And I was the same. We went to London Bridge. We got a Regis Business Lounge. It wasn't a fancy spot. It was in the Norton Rose building, right on the river. So it was. But I was so used to going to Venquist to an office at a certain time, leaving at a certain time, and I thought if I get out of that habit now, I don't know whether I can do everything's so new. Something has to be familiar. So getting on a tube into the city and just doing that was familiar for me. And so where did you come up with the name? I love the name. It stands out. And the logo with the E,
definitely.
The reverse E, like it just stands out. So where did all that come from?
So it came really from us wanting to have a business that was born on fundamental principles of sort of personality and engagement, basically. I think if you look at, at the time, loads of sort of pharmaceutical recruitment companies, they were pictures of people in white coats and, DNA across the screen and all of that type of thing. And actually what we wanted to really lean on was that surface personality engagement side. So, the sort of notion of good people good at recruitment that also happen to be experts within that life sciences space. So we've always stayed true to life sciences. We work in kind of three distinct markets, which is pharma and biotech, medical technology, and healthcare communications. But the healthcare communications side of a business, there is, they're ad agencies, PR agencies, medical communications companies that work on behalf of pharmaceutical businesses. And I think at the beginning, our brand felt really like a medcoms or a healthcare comms agency in many ways. And that's where that meet thing came from. We wanted a business where, we were clear about our intentions of engaging with people, creating a really great service, being experts within the space, but, being totally authentic and transparent and honest, which, was maybe some of the things that I felt I lacked within, a sort of a bigger S3 environment, which is more KPI driven by its nature of its size. Actually, we wanted to make sure that, as I said, that personality was, front and center, which is, where meat came from, basically.
And what was your life like at that point? So 26 years old, did you have any commitments? Was there anything else that was in the way at that point when you started the business?
No, really not. I was living in London. I loved my life in London. I was living with friends, doing what most people do throughout their, 20s, basically. But, I didn't have, I suppose in some ways that meant that there wasn't a pressure, but it meant that there was a really big pressure as well, because I really wanted to get on with my career. I've always been career driven. I've always wanted to have a big career, not only because of the fact that it genuinely stimulates and engages me in terms of how I think, but the financial security and everything that came with it. Again, important to me, like most people who go into the recruitment industry. So no, I was, young, single, no commitments, and just head down into making this work.
That is it. I mean, I was 26, moved to Clapham when I came back from Australia.
Of course, yeah.
And I mean, it was literally, I remember getting there and thinking, because I was on like a very average basic. I had no money saved, and I'm in the most tempting place on the planet. Like, there's literally every night of the week's busy, and it was just looking back, there was some of the most amazing years. But again, I was employed by somebody else at that age. The thought of being a business owner at 26, I mean, takes some confidence to do it. Definitely.
But again, like I said, I did reference it before. Like, I genuinely believed it would work. Like, I didn't think that it was a roll of the dice. I thought there was a dynamic between us that, I was really confident that it would be successful. I knew the end markets that we were picking were not cyclical and, high growth. So, even on a base level, I knew it would work. But like I said, I do think, being that age and not having, responsibilities or anything like that really helped, because I had that sort of overarching, as I've just said, do it for a year, let's see how it goes, and, and reassess from there. But, we've been profitable literally from year one. We've grown year on year. So there's never been a time where I've had those, oh, is it working moments, which, again, I'm really pleased. That doesn't mean it's been plain sailing, far from it, but it's never been a moment where you think this isn't working and I've got to find a sort of extra level of grit to push past it. It's been a lot of sort of good news and year on year growth, really.
Amazing. What was the dynamic between the three of you? How did you split what you did in the early days? Because I think it's difficult sometimes when you've all been sales recruiters, like you all just do the same stuff. How did you split it up?
We just sort of, we basically split our markets. So when we started very, very early doors, we did pharmaceuticals. So, worked within pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, contract research organizations. And then we had that healthcare communications side of what we did as well. And we just kind of split the end markets, really. Right. I think pharma was known to us, albeit we had, non-solicitation agreements. So we had to, make sure that we honoured those at the beginning, which, was the right thing to do, and, meant that everybody could sleep at night. But, makes it hard. But I still think that any business owner should, take those things seriously, because you just don't need that stress in your life early doors. The healthcare communications side of our business was a bit more unknown. It was brand new clients, albeit that actually Paul's wife Becky worked in that sector, so we had quite a nice sort of warm entrance into some of the people that were within her network. So we basically split the end markets, and focused on those for the first 12-18 months.
And how did the business grow at that period? Did you go and hire people, or did you just say 3 of you keep your head
down? It was about the 3 of us for probably about 3 months, something like that, and then we made the decision to go and grow early. That was the sort of driver, and I think again that was part of the benefit of not having that strategy of let's recruit in our bedrooms and see what happens and then we'll go into an office. Early doors, we had the infrastructure, we had the business, we had the office environment, so actually hiring people really early was our intention. So within the first 6 months we probably hired a couple of people, essentially they supported us based on the clients that we'd won, in order to be able to continue to deliver into the clients and continue to do the business development to grow the client base as well.
What was the hardest bit about the beginning, if you're looking back? Like, what would you say didn't go so well, or you'd look back and think maybe I'd have done that differently?
I think early days, everything, and it's not that it doesn't matter, so I'm maybe contradicting myself here, but every process, every candidate, every client has a lot of pressure on it, and actually I've always run recruitment businesses and tried to encourage people to have a sort of self-employed mentality. It's like, don't work in that way if you don't believe that it's going to yield results, because that's a waste of everybody's time, and you've got an opportunity to be influential and influence outcomes. So make sure that that's a priority point, really. I suppose at the very, very beginning, everything is weighted, because you're wanting to get those first milestone, the first deals for everybody, the first 6-figure months, the first the contractors out, the first business development wins. So there's all of these, there's lots of firsts. And I think, that is challenging, because you're super emotionally invested in it. You're wanting to navigate those kind of milestones so that you can really kick on and get to your goals and your vision for the business. So I think that's probably, the hardest thing. And I think the second hardest thing is just that balance of being a salesperson and doing what you're good at, building clients, running recruitment processes, but also being an environment where there's no back office. If the printer doesn't work, you've got to fix the printer. And if all of a sudden the emails go down, you're the one that's got to drop everything that you're doing to fix it. So I suppose it's not hard intellectually hard, but it's really hard in terms of just that juggle of how do I make sure that I'm a really effective salesperson, business developer, but also that the business isn't running on vapor and there's some sort of operational stability underneath it.
So at what point did you start looking at that? So I know that, we talked offline, you talked about the fact you've actually rebranded the back office. It's called the Hub. I've never heard anyone talk about it. I want to find more.
Back in 2018, we did that, actually. So to go back to the history to start with, so our first ever back office operations, however you want to call it, hire, is still with us. She now leads our operations globally. And she started the business, Charlotte, she's awesome. She started the business as a jack of all trades. She sorted out the filing and the piles of paper that were mounting up, and she put systems and processes in place, and organized us basically, and and took it from a business that I think I think I'm a fairly unusual recruitment CEO, is I am genuinely quite operationally and process focused. I like efficiencies, and I think that they pay dividends in terms of a successful business. So, it wasn't total chaos, but bringing Charlotte into the business was the moment where you were like, okay, I've got loads of time back, because, now I'm not on the phone to Orange for 3 hours or trying to, sort these things out. So we probably hired Charlotte. So she is still in the business, and I think she's 9 years now. So it was a good couple of years.
2.5 years in.
Yeah, it was a good couple of years before we hired somebody in an operational position. I look back in hindsight, was it too late? Probably, but we had that sort of lean mentality to what we were doing. And as I said, I'm pretty handy. Ali's good at tech. Like, we just kind of did the stuff that we needed to do to make it work. But she was our first ever hire, a bit of a jack of all trades, as I said. And since then, we've really diversified our back office. And it used to be called ops, and then I was like, okay, that doesn't really make sense for internal recruitment. And then trainers, where do they sit? And I really wanted to create a brand for them, and an identity which talked to them being central to our growth strategy. So the hub was the name that we landed on, and in 2018 I rebranded the back office, and now we've got all of the different functions, so finance, marketing, people, internal recruitment, operations, all but they sit within our hub.
Wow,
basically.
I love that. I think that's awesome, and I think
That's cool.
Giving them that as well, it puts such a, you're celebrating them, aren't you? Because I think in our world it's quite common that they're seen as then they're not celebrated.
Well,
they
it's
don't
back office, isn't it?
They're not revenue generators, are they? So it's like, they sit there and they're not always celebrated. But if you can give them a brand, and I think that's the difference I've noticed of all these interviews, 200 and odd interviews now in 2 years. The businesses that get to where you guys are and beyond, they really do get the fact that it's more that it's not just about having great salespeople. It's about it's a proper engine that runs. Like, it's got to be repeatable.
You can't scale. You can start a business and run a business, in my opinion, of course, fly by the seat of your pants. You can't scale it because it just breaks. Something happens that means that it's either really difficult for the people that you work for, or there is a large financial implication. And I think when you start to go into the mindset of scaling, then you have to have operational backstop there.
You always knew that was the vision? Was it always going to be a people business that you were going to build?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it talks to what I was saying before about the meat, our emblem. Our vision that we, put together 8-9 years ago now was to build a brilliant life sciences recruitment company that people love working for first. Because my belief was that if I create an employer brand that people really like working for, we will attract the best talent, we'll retain the best talent, and in turn, our clients and candidates will get the best caliber service as well. And I still believe it to this day. The people that are in our business are absolutely what make it. There's just no question mark about that at all. So, therefore, it's important to have that identity both in your sales teams and your sales forces. But as I said, that underpinning of sort of excellence underneath it that makes scaling as smooth as it can be.
I'm interrupting this episode of the RAG podcast to bring you a message from our sponsor, Odro. You know by now that Odro are the #1 video interview platform for recruiters around the world. Now, they keep bringing out new features, from Odro Capture to Odro Producer, and it just keeps getting better and better and better. But now, recently, they've just announced a new feature to the platform, which is a complete game changer. During COVID-19, they realized that the recruitment audience, the communication was changing. Globally, their clients and candidates were using Microsoft Teams and Zoom more than anything else. The phrase, let's jump on a Zoom call or jump on a Teams call, has actually replaced the words video interview for a lot of their conversations over the last 6 months. Now, they were thinking, how are we going to eradicate this? How are we going to make Odro the name that everyone talks about for the interview process? And they realized they didn't need to. They needed to integrate. So for the first time ever, they're the first video interview platform on the planet that have decided and managed to integrate with Zoom and soon to be integrated with Microsoft Teams. So with one click, after recording a Zoom video, you can now drag that into Odro and create everything else that Odro has, from adding the CV, the heat maps, the capture, and the producer elements. You get all the benefits of Odro before and after the interview, but you get to use Zoom, which is client-friendly on all levels. So this is massive. Teams is coming. It's the first time anyone's ever done it in our sector, and it is literally going to change the way you work in 2021. Get in touch with my friends over at Odro at odro.co.uk, or if you're already a user, reach out to your account manager to make sure you've got this feature. Back to the show. What do you think is the trigger for a business that's trying to do this, right? What are the symptoms or the signs they can look out for if they say they might only be two or three staff now? What are they going to see or spot or feel to know that actually this is time to start investing in operational support?
So the rule of thumb that I've always applied to it within our business is when a business gets to 10 to 15 people, or when a team gets to 10 to 15 people, they need operational support. You know, that's the nature of the beast, really. So I suppose for me, that was the point, that when we were at that 10 to 15 mark, the time that you spend on operational activities when you are supporting a business of 10 to 15 people means that you just cannot be efficient. It's a disproportionate amount of time. Whereas, you know, you could look at it lots of ways. You know, we joke all the time. In the past, I'm like, I am the most expensive office manager you've ever met in all your life. And that's genuinely, I think, the point that you get to. What am I doing that could be done by somebody else effectively and probably better than I'm doing it? And what could I be doing that actually is really going to drive the business forward? So I think, you know, again, for your listeners, to me, that magic number of 10, when you've got 10 recruiters or 10 salespeople, you know, all doing their own thing, I personally think at that stage, that's when you need to wrap support around them so that they can be more efficient, and you've got somebody really owning that operations mentality.
Yeah. So you talk us through the kind of horizons in the business, right? So you get to say, how big were you when you brought the lady in, the first operational person?
About 10.
About 10, right?
10, 12 people maybe. Yeah.
When did you see another level where you probably needed to grow even more, and you need to lay even more infrastructure, because you probably, you know, you hit a point where what you did to get 10 is no longer, you know, fit for purpose for the next phase?
So I think after we sort of fixed the operational side, you know, having somebody on there that was much more efficient, much more organized, much more sort of buttoned down in terms of these systems and processes, you know, and with some sort of financial experience. I think for us, because we are a people-driven organization, the next need really was, you know, people in the business that would support the workforce. So, you know, our organizational development team that have internal recruitment, learning and development, and people as kind of separate functions in the business now. But our first hire there was somebody that kind of bridged it. You know, she did internal recruitment, so she helped us in terms of growing the business. But she also did some sort of learning and development, mentoring, onboarding, training side of things, which historically I'd always led as well. So I think that was the sort of next phase that we had in the business. After that was marketing, you know, thinking about content creation and making sure that the brand was being positioned really effectively in the business, you know, as well as then, you know, creating a finance team, which again made that systems and the processes were scalable as well. So it wasn't necessarily that there was sort of milestones, or it was like at that point we needed that person. It was then more about evolving the brand and thinking, you know, what do we need to elevate here in order to make sure that we are constantly growing and constantly evolving. And that was when we started introducing these new functions, and essentially these responsibilities came off the founders and into people that were then sort of owning those departments or functions.
Makes sense. And I think was it 6 years in or so when you decided the US was the next move? So tell us about that story.
So we started the business in out London, Charlotte Street, as I've said, covering the European region, 2009. I was running our healthcare communications business at the time, and I was working on all of the executive level placements. And what I was finding in like 2012 was that my clients were SVPs, EVPs based in healthcare communications agencies, predominantly in New York, that were then responsible for placing executive level people into their European offering. So, I was looking to scale healthcare communications. It was a great brand for us. We were really known as, the sort of go-to recruitment agency within that pharma healthcare advertising space, or communication space. And I was running the team there that like I said, a lot of my clients were in the Americas. So I'd always known that I wanted to take the business globally. My gut probably thought that we would do that in Europe before we went to the Americas, but it was this opportunity that arose in healthcare communications. It's a good story, actually. I went to New York on a hen-do bachelorette, dependent on where you're listening, and I just stayed for like 3 or 4 days afterwards. It's an awesome time. And I just started meeting people, just started networking, started meeting my clients that I'd engaged with, understanding more about these agencies that were in the Americas, and that was really where our growth into the Americas was born. So we did a number of years kind of building an American presence out of London. I moved my now SVP in New York onto that team, and he was digging out some client relationships there, working with me, and we just early on 2013 made some really amazing client connections there, which educated us on how to do business in America really effectively. And it was at that point that I thought, if we're really going to do this, we need to be out there. And it's interesting, the question you asked me before about, did you have any responsibilities or otherwise? I was really happy in London. I didn't want to go to America, even though New York is firmly where you can see on this artwork here where my heart is. But I wasn't desperate to go, but I knew it was the game changer for our business, and I knew that if it was truly going to be a success, then I needed to go. I needed to be the person to spearhead it. So we went down all the visa and all of the, the compliance stuff that you have to do to physically be able to go there. And then, in the summer of 2015, we made the move, and myself and a launch team of three others moved to New York City. It was a 6 to 12 month project to me, and then 5 years later, I was dragged back, kicking and screaming. But so it's been.
So you went over, or did you go over with a partner or anything like that at the time?
No, I went over on my own at that point. I had met my husband at that point, but we hadn't decided we were going to be together properly. And he was actually in Asia at that point as well. So there was just this opportunity that I went over there, and August 2015 made the move, packed up my flat in Balham.
What was it like? So you lived in Balham. So what was it like moving over there? What was the similarities and differences?
It's interesting with America is that, we speak the same language, and there's obviously not the cultural barriers that you would if you were going to launch in Asia, as an example. And there aren't the language barriers if, I was to go to Germany, again, not speaking the language. There's none of those things. But it's such a different place. It's culturally such a different place, particularly in New York. Doing business in New York is really different. It's brash, it's straight up. It really suits my style. But when we first went to America, we were all a bit, would you mind? And could you possibly? And they were like, what are you talking about? Just get to the point. Like, they didn't get us at all. And we had to really change the way we communicated. We had to change the way we business developed. We had to change the way we engaged with candidates, particularly in that closing period. New York City is the city of opportunity. So, people wanting 30, 40, 50K raises is just what happens. And we had to learn how to navigate that in a way that is totally different in the UK and certainly in mainland Europe as well. So running the business was really different, amazing, but super different. Actually living there, totally different as well. You know, as I keep on saying, you know, my heart is in New York City, but it's an amazing city when you've got your feet under the table. It's a lot when you haven't. You know, it's super busy. It's go go go. You know, there's just a lot about it. It takes a while to kind of understand it. And I think, you know, that's what I would say with people who are making the move to launch new offices in new places, is that you really have to give it 6 months of it not feeling quite right, you know, of
Yeah.
you not, you know, and homesick's probably like a big phrase of putting it, but you definitely feel it. It's like, what
Yeah.
have I done? You know, I'm away from all of my friends. I'm, you know, in a business environment that is not, I'm not used to being in, and is totally different, you know. And I think Rebecca, actually, who's one of the girls, she's now a director in my New York business, but, you know, she had a tough ride, and she is uh, a really, you know, brave, determined, ambitious girl who's come from a family who have traveled all over the place. And, you know, I remember the Christmas before we went, and I said to her, I said, look, Beck, you've got to do some soul searching, because if this doesn't make you happy, then you shouldn't do it. You know, life is too short. And as much as I don't want one of my launch team to leave, I also don't want you to be totally miserable. But come back after Christmas and give it a different go, basically. And to her absolute credit, she did. And, you know, has lived a very happy life. And I'm, you know, who knows whether she will be back in the UK at some point. They live a pretty rock and roll life out there. So I think I wouldn't if I were them. But
What would you say then? Just to touch on a point you made about the difference in, you know, closing and things. Can you give us an example of something you did that was traditionally British that didn't work, like, or it just, you know, messed up?
So I actually remember we were on a club lunch. It was actually when we were still running the business out of the UK. We were on a club lunch. It was the last day of the month. It was an absolute circus. I was actually so embarrassed. We were at that restaurant in London, which used to be the top of the building in, is it Paramount? It used to be called the top of the building in Tottenham Court Road.
Right.
And it was
I know
just
what
a
you mean.
circus. Everybody was on and off the phone. I actually just felt so embarrassed, because I was like, what do we look like? And I had to speak to a candidate because she was getting frustrated about, you know, this process of securing her opportunity, basically. And it was a moment in time where I changed, and I was the sort of last person in the closing process, I suppose. You know, she'd built a relationship with her recruiter, and that had gone as far as it could do in terms of actually making this placement happen. So I was the sort of last person. And it was a moment in time when I realized that you have just got to be so straight up, so direct, and say things that, so in this example, she was looking for a really high raise. And, you know, my language to her was, look, statistically speaking, you're not going to get this. Most people don't move jobs and get a 50K raise in salary. So statistically speaking, it's not going to happen. But I'm not telling you it's definitely not going to happen, because you're an individual and they're a business. But if you go into this with the belief that it is definitely going to happen, you're going to offend people, and you need to tone that down, because it's not, you know, it's not successful for you. And I was really direct and really straight, and, you know, basically told her she wasn't worth it. And it worked a dream. She went into
Really?
that call. She was really charming with the client, and the client came back, said, we're not going to offer a 50K raise, but we will offer a 40, because that call was great. And it was a
Wow.
moment in time when I thought, if I'd have done that, maybe try and say this, and, you know, try and position it that way, or, you know, coached her softly around how to handle that call, it would have fallen apart for sure. Whereas actually there was that moment in time where I was like, you can't say that. Statistically speaking, it's not going to happen. If you go into it with that mentality, you are likely to offend. But go and try, like, give it a red hot go. And I've got my fingers crossed for you, girl.
I love that. I love that. A final interruption to today's episode to introduce Vincere. Vincere is the all-in-one CRM ATS platform built for the recruitment and staffing industry. Now, I first heard about these guys about a year ago. The amount of prospect recruitment agencies and clients I was working with that were telling me they were moving over to Vincere, I had to look into it. And what I found was a business that had a global reach with multiple offices around the world. So they've got this follow the sun methodology, which allows them to support recruitment businesses wherever you are and be in your time zone. But the technology that they've invested in is becoming a disruptor in the space. More and more recruitment businesses are doing this to give their their recruiters a competitive advantage. They broke into the G2 Crowd's momentum grid as a market leader based on their reviews from their customers. So the agencies that are using this platform are raving about it. Now, if you're a RAG listener and you're thinking about changing CRM, or you're a new business looking to launch with a new CRM, then I would get in touch with these guys, because if you mention that you're a RAG listener, they're doing an amazing deal. By visiting www.vincere.io/RAG, you can get an exclusive deal which offers 2 months completely free on a 2-year commitment, or 3 months completely free on a 3-year commitment. This applies to all licenses that you've either signed up for now or that you'll add in the duration of the contract. So get on there and have a look. Finally, if you're listening and you're a recruiter and you're thinking, I want to move into a more of a business development role, and I'd like to keep hold of my recruitment knowledge. Well, these guys are recruiting for a BD person, well, multiple roles in both Sydney and London right now. So if you've got a strong recruitment background, you want to move into BD, and you want to work for a fast-moving tech business that's helping people like you right now, then get in touch via their website, because they're hiring today. Back to the show. So you go there for a 6 to 12 month project. How did it end up being 5 years? Like what was it that kept you there and moving forward?
So it was just, it was the business, really. You know, I love New York. I love the life that I created for myself there, and, you know, friends and all of the good stuff that comes with it. But the business opportunity was enormous. And our European business is also super exciting, and there's lots of growth there. You know, we opened a business in Berlin in 2019, you know, which is going from strength to strength as well. So the European business definitely offers loads of opportunity, but I think the Americas is so enormous that you have to have a strategy based on prioritization, or you just try and do everything all at the same time. So I made sure that we had a really tight strategy at the beginning, which actually meant that, you know, we were essentially working in healthcare communications in and around New York, and in pharma in New York and New Jersey. So we kept super tight to those locations, and then opened the San Francisco business just a year later to really focus on the Bay Area, which again is a real hub for, you know, life sciences organizations and life sciences businesses. But we were, and we still are, ironically, 7 years on, we're still scratching the surface. You know, we're still nowhere near taking a significant market share. And I just never, ever felt that my work there was done. You know, I never felt that, okay, I've taken that business to a point now where we have got the right level of presence, the right level of engagement, the right level of client base. And, you know, I definitely, you know, COVID, all of these things that have happened to us, you know, I definitely think there's, you know, opportunity for us to grow significantly there as well. So, yeah, I genuinely felt the work there was never done, and I wanted to really be there and lean into those businesses, both in New York and San Francisco, to deliver the growth that, you know, I knew was possible. And it's been the game-changing part of our business for sure. You know, 70% of our NFI now comes from the Americas. So, you know, it's a big chunk of our business, and really excitingly, still scratching the surface.
I bet. What was it like hiring? Because obviously the first few that came over were Brits like yourself. I can imagine what that's like. You know, you're all in it together. It's startup mode again. What was it like then building a team for the second time? Based of locals, or did you focus on locals, or did you try and get expats?
We did hire expat people into the business that, you know, were in New York and looking to move businesses. But, you know, I knew really early on that I was creating an American business. I didn't want a group of, you know, British recruiters working, you know, out there. I wanted to create a business that, again, had that scalability, because it was a American business basically. So we hired a couple of people straight away, 2 guys that joined our business. I mean, hilarious. Often they had no idea what we were talking about, you know, just the colloquialisms and the language. So there were lots of language barriers and some, you know, hilarious moments where they just didn't really have a clue what we were talking about or what we were looking to get done. But, you know, we just hired some great people. You know, I think there are some really great people that flock to New York that, you know, want to be in that city to, you know, build really exciting careers. You know, and we were really lucky to, you know, be able to attract some awesome people. Some are still in the business, some aren't, but just
the difference?
really.
What differences did you have to, or how did you have to adapt to to train and coach and develop those people as opposed to what you did in London?
So I think the first thing is just about bringing them in. It was about getting our head round sort of academic backgrounds. I didn't know what a GPA was or what certain schools meant or anything like that. So I think, when you hire predominantly graduates in our space, 2-1, 2-2, you know what you're talking about. All of a sudden it was, GPAs of 3 to 4, and we couldn't benchmark actually, the sort of competencies and the capabilities of the people into the business particularly well at the beginning. So that was a really big learning curve. I think from an L&D point of view, it's honestly dramatically not that different. We as an organization constantly think about evolving our learning and development programs. There's definitely some language shifts. You don't say CV, you say resume. And, there's various different sort of ways of communicating the training material that we had. But by its nature, it was pretty similar, with one difference being in America, we did create a sort of sales and delivery or sales and recruiting structure. So we had some people coming into the business that weren't 360, totally delivery focused, and that probably meant that we tweaked the onboarding and learning and development, material as well. But it's not brand new. It's the same skills, the same competencies, the same client management and people management skills, just communicated differently.
Do you think you brought the British style of like the S3 and how you'd built meat already? Was that the style you brought? Because you do hear a lot of, I hear people every day telling me, when competing with US-based firms, that aggression we have over here, the pace that we work, can often mean that we separate ourselves quite quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Would you say that's true for what you experience?
So I think, again, one of the benefits of actually launching the business myself is I was able to read the culture and read the positives and negatives of applying our strategies and structures and style in the business. So there were some things that absolutely, that kind of S3 esque approach, of being persuasive and engaging and persistent and all of the things that come with it definitely helped us. We brought that into the business, and working with a sense of urgency, I think, was something that's put us in good stead right from the very beginning in terms of just sourcing the candidates that a lot of our clients just hadn't seen before. So I think we definitely did that. But I also read the room from a cultural point of view. And I think that's what's really interesting about our business is culturally, all of the offices are different. The West Coast and the East Coast are super different in terms of what the employer brand looks and feels like, albeit it's got the same cornerstones and the same pillars of who we are and what we do and what we value and what our purpose is. Actually, stylistically, it's quite different between those businesses. And then, of course, New York to Berlin is different again. So I think that was the big benefit, is I sort of read the room and was able to really define the culture, which was one that really served us in America, as opposed to just dropping what worked in Europe straight into it without any sort of big consideration of how it would be received and how scalable it was as well.
Makes sense. And going into COVID, so if we go back to, say, January of 2020, when you were based in New York at that point.
So I'd come back, actually. I was in the UK. I actually had a newborn at that point. I had a baby in November 2019. So my maternity leave was never going to be a conventional maternity leave, but COVID probably put a whole different slant into it as well. So I was back in the UK. I was actually in New York. We went with my daughter when she was 4 months old or something to go to America to spend some time with the guys in New York work-wise, but also, see our friends and family and all of that type of thing. So I was in New York when COVID just kicked off, but my home was in the UK at that point.
Right. So you'd already made a decision to come back. And how did, obviously the pandemic affected us all quite in New York and London and Berlin in similar ways, but how did each division or each location respond? Was the differences in the way that people in San Francisco and New York and London and Berlin did respond in the pandemic?
I think that's what's interesting about COVID again, and we're seeing it now, aren't we? We've just had to postpone our summer party. We were talking about it just before, our summer party in London, because of, what's changed. So, California was in a really rough place for a long time. And actually those guys, were really out of the office for a year. From August, we didn't even have office space there because the stay-at-home order meant that it was just totally unnecessary. So, I think from a COVID perspective, in many ways, we are lucky, I would say, being in life sciences, is that it's not like my business is, predominantly focused on the aviation industry or hospitality, So we've definitely, we've had a good pandemic, if you want to, look at it that way. But actually, I think what's been really great about the experience of our employees and my business during COVID is that we've actually been really agile internally as well, and so the move to remote working, whilst it was hard on people personally, professionally, it really didn't make that much difference. All of our systems are cloud-based. We have data analytics tools which allow people to measure their own productivity really effectively. Our phone system is VoIP. There's all of the stuff that it was literally a case of them sort of taking their laptops and their headsets home and starting again, the next day. I think culture, we've really watched that, and we've really made sure that in each region we've done the right thing to create the, an ongoing, really engaging culture within the business, within the parameters of what's possible there as well. But to answer your question, it's been super different in California, in New York City, in London and Berlin. At varying times, we've had to change
New York, isn't New York, the governor basically said he's removing all restrictions?
Yesterday, they had a fireworks display yesterday, which is, they're done. That's what they're saying. I mean, like 70% of the population of New York State is vaccinated. So, they've just really got on it. They've really
is the freedom of in and out of New York though? Like, could other states come in who aren't vaccinated?
So do you know what? There's lots of rules there, as I understand it, and there's lots of different quarantining and various different things. So I don't think their borders are closed, but I think there are quarantining things in there from a state to state basis. But yes, they're certainly in a better shape now than we are.
What about
at the moment?
How's San Francisco?
So things are starting to get better there as well. Still reduced capacity in offices, but outside of that, it is much, much better. I think the rules there now is you don't have to wear masks if you're vaccinated or if you're with people that are vaccinated as well. So they're starting to kind of bring different rules into it there, and we're definitely getting our workforce to use the office now as a learning development hub as much as a place to get together and learn by osmosis and enjoy each other's company as well. So it's definitely starting to come back for sure.
Okay, and obviously it's probably evident in the people I've interviewed over the last 2 years that there's not many females at the top of businesses, right? And one of the things you've mentioned is, it's probably not a conventional maternity leave. And I believe that's probably one of the factors that goes against female leaders in our sector is, that massive debate. How do I become a mother? How do I have a family? And how do I also, it's different working for a company, but when you own the company, when it's yours. So how have you managed it? And what advice would you have for females that are wanting to do something similar to you?
Yeah. So I am not a believer that you can have it all. It isn't as simple as that, and I think that sort of narrative that's pushed out that, as a woman and as a businesswoman and as a mother, you can create this balance between all of the different parts of your life. I just think it's romantic. It doesn't work like that. In saying that, it's also not impossible, and there is increasingly the opportunity in my mind, and I genuinely think this kind of shift to more flexible working will be huge for returning mothers, really, really big, that you can be successful at all elements of your life, but it will feel like a juggle. It is a juggle. But I love what I do. I love this business. It sounds super cliched, but it is genuinely my first baby. And, the success that we've had and the experience that I've had watching my management team grow and develop and achieve, is really important to me. And I don't want to put that down. Like, it is my choice. I don't want to not do that. But equally, I knew and my husband and I wanted a family as part of our future as well. And it's definitely challenging. It's definitely a juggle. When my daughter started nursery at the back end of last year, and we had the barrage of illnesses that just hit when a child goes into childcare, which is super important because they've got to build their immune system, but it is really challenging. And I think what I try and do all of the time is be kind to myself and compassionate with myself about how much you can do, and and actually value the work that you are doing, both in your home life and in your business life, and not comparing them as worse or better or more important or less important. They're all important. It's just about finding some sort of balance that means that you feel like you can achieve across the board, and it is definitely possible. I think for women in this industry that are looking to start a family, I think I just urge you to try and find a way to make it work within the recruitment industry. I hate the fact that we have so many women leave this industry because they don't believe that they can be a successful recruiter or be a successful recruitment director or be a successful business owner and have a family. It's just not true. And there are definite bend and flex that needs to come from both sides, but it makes me really sad and frustrated that people leave the industry for that reason. And I think as employers, we've got to work really hard on changing that. My head of people had a baby last year as well. She's returning back to work now. She started on a 3-day week. She's going up to a 4-day week. She's then going to do a flexible 5-day week. And we've just made it work in a way that she's so valuable and she's so excellent for our business and for our leadership team that as an employer, I feel a sense of responsibility to really make that work in a way that, the wheels aren't going to fall off and, she will combust. So I think my advice there is to people is don't leave because you think you have to. Try and make it work and be confident about what you can and what you can't do, and be accepting that it's not about having it all. It's about having a fulfilled work and home life that is difficult to achieve, but absolutely not impossible.
I imagine your business is unique though, in the way, or, compared to many, that the leader of the business is making it work. Like if you have that role model to say, and you just expect that your team would be more open to be like, well, if Hannah can do it, I can do it. Whereas if your ownership are all male and there's no evidence of that working at the moment, and you're insular in your business, where do you? There is a lack of female role models in our sector in general, I think.
Totally. And that's why I urge women to try and make it work. And it might feel uncomfortable and out of your comfort zone to ask for certain amounts of flexibility, or to, change the parameters of your job role, or to do what you need to do. But I think that's what I think needs to happen more. The only thing that will change the role model challenge that we have is if businesses accept and allow the shifts that mean that role models believe that a career in the industry is viable. And I've got all my girlfriends, many of my girlfriends work in this industry. Most of them have got children or aspire to have children. And most of them have been through a tricky time getting it right. But I think that's what I want to encourage, is people to really, give it a go, accept that it doesn't feel easy. But actually, as I've said a few times, you can get real fulfillment over both sides of your life, for sure.
For sure. You should do. So, look, we're at an hour already. I don't know where.
I know. Gosh.
So, Hannah, where does this leave you now? So the future, just give us the vision. Like, you're at 135 staff.
Yeah.
12 years, you could I'm sure, wrap things up in a few years, spend time at home with your child and build a big
Yeah.
family, all that. But I don't get that vibe. I feel like, like you said, you've used the phrase, we've not even scratched the surface on many
Yeah.
occasions, right?
Yeah.
So where are you heading? Like, and if I was, say, coming in to interview for your business, what is that future that you'd be bringing me on the journey to join?
Yeah. So you are right in saying that, the comment that I band around a lot is that there's huge opportunity, not only with our business, but in the end markets that we serve, and I think actually that's something that, has become really apparent through the pandemic in terms of that lack of cyclicality in the market there as well. And just the amount of opportunity that the caliber of our business creates that we're not capitalizing on at the moment because we literally don't have the volume to offer the level of service that we want to. So it is definitely a period of growth for sure. I think I officially was appointed CEO in 2019, and as soon as I sort of got into that position, my visioning then was all about what does 21, 22, 23 look like in terms of what we can achieve. So we are going through a period of high growth. We obviously had a period of sort of consolidation during COVID when everybody was navigate remote onboarding and everything that came with it, which has meant that the business is really ready to receive that growth. And actually, we've got people within our business that want and are driving their team sizes to grow and the capability within their functions to be more as well. So, I think it is a period of growth, but one that I think is genuinely well thought out, defined by strategy, isn't a bums on seats mentality. I don't want this business to be diluted by headcount, and headcount for me is not vanity, it's about taking opportunity. So yeah, we're definitely going into a period of significant growth. We've just finalized a sort of academy hiring model. So, over the last couple of weeks, we had 14 people join our UK business, and the ramp up there has been awesome. It's been so good to see how quickly they've kind of got through the training modules and are productive in terms of what they're achieving there already. So yeah, significant period of growth, significant growth within the regions that we're in. So we don't have aspirations necessarily to totally mix up what we do at this moment in time. It's about capitalizing on the platform that we've built up until now. And for me, it's about creating really meaningful careers for the people that work for us, and we've got such a platform to do that now.
And do you see yourself, are you going to be staying up north, or are you potentially back in New York at some point?
Oh God. So my homes, when I came into lockdown, it was ridiculous. I had a home up in the Northwest, a flat in Balham, an apartment in New York, of which I wasn't using any of them, basically. So as it stands at the moment, I am sat in my home office, which is in my family home in the Northwest. My London base is in Balham, and I would love to think that I will have an apartment in America when travel comes back online. So yeah, I think we're going to take advantage of doing as much travel as we can do as a family before my daughter starts school. So I think that'll be extended periods of time in the Americas, and just doing, making sure that I'm really visual and present alongside my leadership team, my MD and my CFO, to really kick on with the growth that's in front of us.
Wow. Well, Hannah, I've got no doubt you're going to achieve it all, and
Fingers crossed.
Super excited. I'm excited for you, and I'd love to get you back on in let's say a year's time and see how this last 12 months has panned out.
Definitely.
If anyone does want to reach out to you, I feel like there might be males as well. I imagine there'll be some females listening who would love to talk to you and pick your brains. If anyone did want to reach out to you, are you open to giving them a little bit of time just to
100%? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. More than happy.
All right. If anyone does want to, you're tagged on all the posts on LinkedIn. I think that'd be the best bet. It's how we got in touch through LinkedIn as well, isn't it? Awesome. Yeah. Hannah, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Thank you for your time. Nice to chat.
Thank you so much. Guys, thanks for listening. Anyone who's, if you've enjoyed this show, if you've enjoyed Hannah's story, please do me a favor. I say it every week. Share the episode. Don't keep it to yourself. We all know people in our sector who would benefit from stories of growth. And despite competition, I truly believe that together we will achieve more as an industry if we're stronger and we learn from one another. That's why this podcast exists. I've got two or three more episodes left of the season. I'll be back next Wednesday at 1:30, again live on LinkedIn, and following day, Thursday, on Spotify and iTunes. I'll be back then. In the meantime, you stay safe, and I'll see you soon.